Hey, welcome back everybody to another public session on our sales skills workshop. Today we're going to focus on the close. And like it says there, how are we going to close without applying pressure to the customer? I want you to get much more comfortable with the close. And I'm going to teach you today in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to teach you a simple, easy to use close that I personally have used to close millions and millions of dollars of business. I've taught hundreds, maybe up to 1,000 people how to do this close. It's really easy, and I know you're going to be able to do it. So the first thing you do is you have to change your mindset. Closing isn't a mystery. It's actually the easiest part of sales. I want you to think of closing as a repeatable sequence. You're giving your presentation, you get to a certain point in your presentation, and you pivot to moving forward. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But don't make it any more complicated than that. New salespeople get it in their minds and they get all freaked out about asking for the sale, closing. Am I doing it the right way? How are you closing? Just follow a repeatable sequence, move from the presentation to the close. And like I said, don't overcomplicate it. Just get it to be a repeatable thing. So why are we offering these free sales workshops to the public? Why do we do that as an association? Well, we're actually starting to get a regular group for these Tuesday trainings. Membership in our association is growing every week, and some of our members are here for the Tuesday training. But inside the mastermind, our members actually go deeper into sales and sales psychology. They're just like you. Our members sell for a living, and they want to keep getting better at their craft, and we want you to become a member too. But we also have a lot of non-members that are coming back to these Tuesday trainings every week. And that's really what I was hoping for. And I want to build that number every week. And don't get me wrong, I'm really happy that you're here, but I hope you understand how it bothers me that there aren't 1 million people here taking advantage of free sales training. I just keep in my mind how many people we can help. And I'm going to say it right here. I believe that everyone on the planet deserves free sales training, and they deserve a community of positive, helpful people to get them better at their craft. And like I said, I wish there were 1 million people here because I want everyone to have this level of training. You know, something that I've seen firsthand many times, if you're a good salesperson, if you learn just a few basic skills, you can survive and thrive regardless of the economy. Sales is easy. You know that if you're selling every day. It's not easy, but it's also not hard. Anybody can learn to do this better and more efficiently. And it's really an opportunity because it's not like professional sports where you have to be 1 in 1 million, maybe even 1 in 10 million to reach a certain level in professional sports and make money. If you find your niche, if you find the right company, the right product, the right market, the right type of people to sell to, an average salesperson can be successful, and there's plenty of room to become great. And the only thing that's stopping you from your success in sales are 2 things. It's your skill level and your mindset. And guess what? That's the 2 things that we talk about in these trainings. We give you sales skills, and we help you adjust to a more positive mindset. See, this sales industry, this is our industry as an association. And we're going to work to become a leader in the sales industry. And we're not going to appeal to you with greed and stacks of money and private jets and Lamborghinis. Not at all. We're going to simply, day by day, to anybody who wants to learn, we're going to promote positive, trust-based selling. And we also want to help companies to become more enlightened about how important and valuable their salespeople are. And any salesperson that wants to learn, we welcome you with open arms to these free trainings. See, this free training is a service that we provide as an association to anybody in the sales industry. There's no charge. That's what the Sales Mastermind Association is really about, helping as many people in this industry as we can reach. And we want to get people out of a life where they struggle with money and they have very high levels of stress about selling. They're in a negative environment, and we want to put them into a more positive mindset. We want to lower their levels of stress and negativity. And we really want to change the way people think about our profession in general. Because every salesperson I've met, they're not slick and sleazy. That's the whole perception of salespeople. That's not what I know. The salespeople I know are good people, mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, grandparents. They're just regular people who are trying to make a living. And to all of our association members, if you're on this call today, I don't say it enough, but I'm going to say it now. This is who we are as an association. This free training, this is what we do. This is how we help the industry. This is an organization you can be really proud to support. Because without barriers, regardless of who you are, regardless of your current circumstances, we welcome everyone. And as our membership grows, and I'm going to say this as I'm standing here, as our membership grows, we will help shape the future of the sales industry. And as a member, you're going to have a front row seat as that all happens. So, look, here's the thing. I teach sales techniques, but the real goal is for you to allow these techniques to percolate through you over time. Things don't change instantaneously. The goal in watching videos, coming to workshops like this, reading books, the goal is to start to get comfortable so that when you begin dialing the phone, you're not constantly stressed. You actually have a game plan on how to proceed. And what happens is the more that you're exposed to these mastermind sales techniques over time, you start to get what I call you get even with the sale, meaning that you have a plan, you have an even shot at winning. And then over time, you start to get ahead of the process, meaning that you are starting to control the process. And as you'll see today, we're going to talk specifically about controlling the close. Sales is a series of pivots. And what I mean by that is everybody that you talk to, every customer that you get on the phone or in person, however you sell, everybody is different. They're a unique human being. No two people are the same. But what is the same is the psychological process that they go through from first resistant, I'm not interested, all the way to being closed, to becoming a customer. They have to go through what I call a series of psychological shifts. And from a sales perspective, you have to help your customer pivot and shift from one mindset to the other. So the first one that we talked about in a previous workshop is the most obvious one. You call a lead, or you're cold calling, or you're following up on a lead, and the first thing they tell you is, yeah, I'm not interested. Well, you filled out this lead form. Well, yeah, I was interested yesterday, but I'm not interested today. You have to learn the techniques that we talked about in that workshop. You have to learn the techniques that will pivot the customer. I call it a jujitsu flip, to flip the customer from one mindset, I'm not interested, to another mindset. Well, okay, I'll give you a minute. Then you have to take, and this is the hardest part of selling right here in the beginning, you have to take the customer who says, well, okay, I'll give you a minute, tell me what it is you do or what you're selling. They're giving you a minute. You have to convert them, flip them psychologically to sharing their problems with you, to sharing their needs, their gaps, their desires, their wants, their pain point. If they don't share the problem with you, it's going to be very, very difficult to sell them. In other words, if you skip this particular pivot, if you skip this step of letting the customer tell you about their problem, it's going to be very difficult to close them in the end. But it's also tough to get somebody out of a mindset, well, okay, you have 1 minute, to opening up and trusting you and giving you all kinds of information. Because once they give you all that information, that's the hardest part, is to get them to give you the information. Once they give you that information, closing is much, much easier. The next pivot, or the next psychological shift in the customer's mindset, is from the point of them telling you their problem, I've got this problem, that problem, I wish I could solve it, to the next pivot, which is, yeah, okay, I'll listen to what you have to say. That's a really important pivot, and that gives you the permission to go ahead and present your product or service. And then finally, getting them to convert from listening to your pitch to a point where they're interested, curious, and most importantly, comfortable with you. That's the purpose of your presentation, to generate interest, comfort, and curiosity. And once you get them to the state of interested and curious, then the close, that pivot to the close, which is what we're going to talk about today, is the easiest part of the sale. So let's set up this close that I'm going to teach you today. Okay, you're working your way up to the close. The customer's qualified. You've had some great conversations with them. You've built a trust connection. The presentation's going smoothly. All signs are positive. And now, after the presentation, and they're happy, they like what they see, now I'm going to show you a pivot, a sequence and a pivot that will take you to this very effective close. And like I said, it's a close that applies zero pressure. So I'm going to show you a video right now Take a minute to watch this video, and then we'll talk on the back end. Hey, welcome back to our discussion about closing techniques. I'm Alan Gordon, sales author and founder of the Sales Mastermind Association. The purpose of our association is to help our members rise above the stress, pressure, negativity, and the high turnover rates that are so common in sales. And instead, we're going to challenge the way you think about selling and ask you to use mastermind sales principles to sell from a positive mindset. Now, hang in with me in this video and follow it carefully. We're going to go very deep into this closing technique, so please take good notes, and all the way to the end, it will come together at the end of this video series. Now, I'm going to show you how to close by working with the principles of customer psychology. We use customer psychology in every phase of the sales process, starting with the cold call, all phases of the relationship, all the way through the close, which we're going to talk about in these videos, and then we keep using customer psychology all the way through asking for referrals. Understanding what the customer is thinking and experiencing emotionally, being aware of their mindset and their psychology at every moment, that's the key that allows us to pull out the right sales technique at just the right time to move the conversation where we want it to be. Once you understand customer psychology, it doesn't surprise you anymore. You can plan for it, and you can use customer psychology to control the customer's emotion and move them to the next step. So to learn the close, we have to imagine that you're already an expert at every other phase of the sale. The conversation's going smoothly, the customer's qualified, they're interested, you've built a really strong trust relationship, and when everything is going good, you get to a point in the sale that I call the closing moment. And this is when you're going to pivot to the close. See, the truth is all selling boils down to a series of moments, and every moment represents a shift in the customer's mindset. These are called pivot points, and the pivot techniques depend on properly reading the psychological signs. And with experience, pivoting becomes fluid and effortless. You can definitely learn to do this. So let's set up the psychology of closing for a minute, and then I'll show you exactly how the pivot sequence works. Pretend I'm selling to Isabel. We've been talking for 20, 30 minutes, but this isn't our first phone call. This is our third or fourth phone call. She's comfortable with me. She likes my company. She's very impressed with my product. She needs my product, and she can clearly see how it's going to solve a problem for her. In fact, during the presentation, she keeps saying, "Wow, this is great." She is displaying all the buying signs. So being a good salesperson, I pivot and make a suggestion that we should move forward. Here's the most straightforward way to close, but unfortunately it doesn't work. Isabel, if it all looks good to you, let's go ahead and get started. This small little pivot in the conversation completely changes the chemistry because it creates a pressure on Isabel. And this pressure is just enough to shift her thinking. She was happy, laughing. Now she has to make a commitment. I've asked her to say yes. So as soon as I say, let's go ahead and get started, Isabel feels this slight pressure, which changes her mood. And you have to understand, the customer's mood changes in milliseconds. And as her mindset shifts slightly, it leads to an objection or some other reason to shut down the conversation. Got to do more research, get back to me, check with a partner, etc. It's a catch-22. If you don't ask for the sale, I guarantee you'll never get it. But when you ask for the sale, you run the risk of pressuring the customer, changing their mindset, and having them shut you down. So here's the riddle. How do you move to a close without messing up the customer's mindset? Well, the answer is, it's all in the timing. The words you use are nowhere near as important as the timing of the close. And if you time it right, they won't even feel that you've pivoted, and they're going to be happy moving forward with you. Timing is all about finding this magical closing moment, and it only lasts for a psychological heartbeat. You literally have about a second to realize that the moment is here and then execute the pivot. If you try to close them before the closing moment, you're going to lose trust and generate unnecessary resistance. If you miss the moment and you don't pivot to the close, I can tell you it happens every time. The customer vectors off in a different direction. They need to ask more questions, do more research, and the opportunity to close today will be lost. And this is what happens to most new salespeople. They think they have a great call going, but they're not aware of, and so they miss the closing moment. And the sale unravels, and it turns into an endless chase to get them back on the phone. but you lost the sale. The customer was ready to be closed, but you didn't recognize the closing moment. So what is this magical closing moment of which I speak? Well, here's the secret. You don't wait for the closing moment. You create the closing moment. Now, your sale might be very different than my sale, so we may have to modify this to your specific situation, but here's the basic sequence. You're presenting. They're listening. All the signs say this is a good fit. Now, at some point, you've given them enough information, not all the information, but enough information to make a positive decision. That's when we start the closing sequence. Again, I've personally sold millions and millions of dollars using this exact sequence and pivot. Anybody can learn it. I've taught it to many, many salespeople who've gone on to become very successful. Because once you start practicing these pivots, you start to get the hang of it, and it really is kind of easy. And that's what I want for you. So we're in the presentation, talk. At this point, they have enough information. So here's the pivot. Whew, well, that's me doing a lot of talking. What questions do you have for me? You see what I did? We pivot from the presentation to opening it up for questions. Whatever question they ask, I say the same thing. That's a great question. Let me explain how that works. Blah, 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 blah. Does that make you feel more comfortable? Every time I answer the question, I always end it with a yes or no question. Does that make you feel more comfortable? Does that clear it up a little bit? Did that answer your question? Do you feel better about how that works now? Excellent. What other questions do you have for me? And then they ask another question. That's a great question. You know, I really didn't cover that in detail. Let me explain how that works. Blah, 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 blah. Does that clear it up for you? Great. I started the closing sequence by encouraging them to ask questions. Now, as a general rule of thumb, I let them ask 2 questions, and then I say, well, you know, those are really good questions. That's the closing moment. After 2 questions, you play it by ear, but after 2 questions, that's the closing moment, and that's when you begin your pivot to the close. Let's understand why this works so well. Now stick with me because this is important. We pivot after they ask a question. Let's go back to Customer Psychology 101. Questions are a psychological sign of interest. Questions are a buying signal. And it doesn't matter what you sell, what industry, what country you're in, what language you speak. People ask questions because they're psychologically checking off boxes in their mind. They can see the end result. They can see themselves doing it, but they're unclear about a few things, so they ask questions. It's all part of a psychological process that they have to go through before they're going to be comfortable saying yes. Now, you remember I said you want to pivot to the close at the moment where it generates the least pressure. That's why we close on questions, because that's the moment when they're interested, when they're psychologically leaning forward. I created the closing moment. They were interested, blah, 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 blah. Then I pivoted the conversation to questions. Whew, that's me doing a lot of talking. What questions do you have? 2 questions later, and we've now arrived at the closing moment. I created that moment, and it's repeatable. You can do it over and over again. Now, obviously, you play it by ear. Sometimes they ask 2 questions. Sometimes they ask a million questions. I let them go on. Sometimes I'll deflect some of their questions, and sometimes they don't ask any questions. You just, with experience, get a feel for the timing. But the key is not to hesitate, because the moment will quickly disappear. And if you miss it, then you need to work much, much harder to get the sale back. So in the next video, I'm going to share with you 2 very simple closes that you can use that will finish this pivot sequence. Watch this video again and take good notes if you didn't the first time, because I really want you to start mastering this closing sequence. It's going to make closing so much easier for you. As I said, check out the members library. I've got the full customer psychology model workshop in there. And this customer psychology model is important because it explains why some people say yes and why others say no. I'll see you at the next video. So I want to review the key points from that video. The first point is you always want to close on questions. I hope you understand why that is. And the reason you want to close on questions is because that's the time when the customer is most interested, curious. I want to find out more. So as soon as they ask questions, you'll flip them without any pressure into the close. And here's the sequence. You give your presentation. Whew, that's me doing a lot of talking. What questions do you have for me? Oh, wow, that's a great question. Let me explain how that works. Blah, 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 blah. Does that make you feel more comfortable? What other questions do you have, right? And you let them ask the second question. Those are really great questions. Now, here's the close. It's called the here's what's going to happen next close. Or you can also call it the permission close or the next step close. Doesn't matter what you call it. It's really simple. Those are really great questions. Here's what's going to happen next. First, we're going to do this, then we're going to do that, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do that. So with your permission, let's go ahead and get step one started, okay? And then give them an A-B choice. Is it John or Jonathan? Do you use a middle initial? Do you want this shipped to your home address or your business address? Doesn't matter what the choice is. Give them an A-B choice. So, for example, if I say, I start, writing or typing into the application or whatever, I start typing in, John. I says, is it John or Jonathan on your, let's say I'm selling insurance. Is it John or Jonathan on your insurance cards? And as soon as he answers, it's Jonathan or John. I don't care what he answers, right? As soon as he gives me the answer, we're closed. Now we're moving into the contract, the application, the deal, whatever the next step is. He's already said, yeah, I want this shipped to my business address. So those are really, really good questions. I'm glad you asked all that, and I'm glad we were able to clear that up. Here's what's going to happen next. First, we're going to do this. First, then we're going to do that. Then another way to say it is we have a two-step process to move forward. First, I'm going to do this. Then we're going to do that. With your permission, let's go ahead and get step one solved, okay? Now, is it John or Jonathan on your application? Simple as that. That's the close, and there's no pressure. Now, here's why this close is so effective. I know you got that from the video, but let me just reiterate why this close is so effective. Number one, you're closing on questions. I cannot overemphasize that enough. Now, again, you're encouraging them to ask questions, which means you're actually setting this close up. You're preparing yourself sequentially to move right to the close. And the big step you have to take, that big pivot, is pivoting from the presentation to opening the floor to their questions. And as soon as they ask questions, now we know they're curious, they're interested, they're checking off their psychological boxes. We use their own momentum to flow into the close. So by closing on questions, you don't generate any resistance. And here's what's also important about the here's what's going to happen next close. You're not actually asking them to make a decision. You're simply listing the next steps. You're not saying, okay, gun to your head, is it going to be a yes or a no? Because most people are afraid to say yes, so they're going to say no and hang on to whatever their miserable problems that they have now. They're not going to want to say yes to you because you force them to make a yes or no choice. You're not asking them to make a choice. You're simply saying, here's what we're going to do next. And this last piece is most important. They still have a chance to object, and many of them will object, which isn't a problem. They still have a chance to say, whoa, hold up. I'm not really ready yet. No problem. And last week we talked about being a tenacious closer, having when they say no, or I'm not ready yet, or I got to think about it. How do you keep taking swings at the close? If this close doesn't work, and this close works about well more than 50% of the time, for me, probably works about 75% of the time. So basically, anyone who's willing to give me the time, share their problems with me, take the time to listen to my presentation, and they're qualified, and I know and they know that we're going to be able to help them solve a problem, I'm able to close on this using this here's what happens next close about 3 out of every 4 people. But still, some people will be hesitant to make a decision, and you're not asking them for a yes or no decision, so you're kind of guiding them into the close. They don't even notice that you've closed them. But many people will still have some discomfort, and they'll still have an opportunity to object. Don't get upset when people say no or think about it or whatever it means. It just means you fouled it off. You just didn't hit a home run yet, right? You're not out. It's like a baseball analogy. You tried to close. They said, I need to think about it. You fouled it off. We're going to take another swing. Foul it off. Foul it off. That's the last workshop, how to be a tenacious closer. Don't take no for an answer. So it's okay that they object because people have a real fear of change, a fear of moving forward, and that's okay. So in summary, what I want to tell you is, and this is the truth, Closing is the easiest part of sales. The hardest part, like I told you, is the beginning of the sale, where you have to get them to move from listening to you to opening up about their problems. That pivot is probably the toughest one, and that takes the most skill. But closing doesn't really, as you can see, this simple close doesn't really take that much skill. It's the easiest part of sales. And I want you to recognize that billions of dollars in sales are closed every single day. It's a natural activity. It's not a supernatural event. It's not a miracle if you close a deal. It's not even a big deal if you close a deal. It's a natural activity. If you close one, move on to the next one and the next one and the next one. Try to close more that day. Try to close more this week. The more you close, the more money you make. It's just a very natural activity to close. And here's the point. Your customers need what you have. You know that you're going to be able to help them. So just make it super comfortable for them to get what they need. So, well, hey, I hope that was helpful. I'm going to open it up for Q&A. I really want to thank you for taking the time to be here. And if you have any questions, now would be the time to ask, or you can meet me in the members discussion board and we can talk there.